Welcome to the Sustaining Creativity Podcast. I'm your host, Mari Riesberg. Over the past several years, I've combined my degrees in acting and somatic psychology to share my sustaining creativity techniques with performers. And now I've decided to share it with a bigger audience that includes you. I believe we are all creative, and this podcast is all about that. I'll be interviewing people from all backgrounds, ages, and creativity experiences to share just how creative we all are. Today, I'll be chatting with Alan C. Paul, musician, creative coach, author, and podcaster. Please enjoy Alan C. Paul. Welcome to the Sustaining Creativity Podcast. Today I am here with Alan C. Paul, musician, creative coach, author, podcaster. Welcome to the podcast.
Mari, thank you so much for having me. It's a joy to be here. Looking forward to a great conversation.
Wonderful. It is a joy to have you, and I cannot wait to dig into all the creative pieces that you bring. But before we get there, why don't you let our listeners know a little bit more about who you are and what you do?
Well, thank you for the opportunity. Put my whole life in 30 seconds, right? Impossible, but I try to do it in 4 words. So I tell people, if you need to know anything about me, I'm a husband, I'm a father, I'm a creative, and I'm forgiven. And I figure that if you can cover those 4 things, then you kind of know who I am. So husband of 1 wife, 26 years, Leah still allows me around here. So that's the biggest part of my life. Then a father of 3 kids who are all grown, believe it or not. If you're looking at video, yes, I do look like my son. But we look at, people see us and they think we're brothers. Like, no, these are my children. They just grew up taller than me. And then as a creative, I am a musician, been there for, pretty much all my life, perform in both sacred and secular situations as a professional musician, and forgiven because my faith kind of gives a total package to my life. The frame of my life is always in the fact that, I lead with my beliefs. And so that's me in a nutshell. And I've been writing some books and making some music since 2015 about God and gigs. And that's kind of where my platform has landed, with all those 4 of those things connected together.
Nice. My goodness. I don't know that I've ever had a guest be that succinct with 4 words that sums up who they are. And that, I love it though. I mean, way to go figuring it out who you are. Yes.
Only took almost 50 years, but yes, the puzzle pieces start to fall into place at some point.
That is so true. But what a beautiful collection of things that you have in your life that it sounds like bring you so much joy and allow you to be the creative human that you are in so many different avenues. When you think about creativity, what does it mean to you to be creative?
It's such a good question. And what it means to me, I think that's key. Everything you just said, a distinction, right? What it means, definitions, we could put all the Merriam-Webster's together, but then what it means to me. And what I was saying to someone earlier, this question came up, and it was such a great thing for me as a musician, because a lot of us label musicians and whoever like, oh, I wish I could be like a musician. I wish I could be a creative and all these things. And we can see it as a blessing and a curse, right? Because sometimes we say, oh, this is wonderful. But then other people are like, well, why do you think I'm so different than everybody else? I'm just a human being, but I just happen to do this for a living. Yeah. So creativity to me is very human, number one, because I'm a person and I create because I'm a person. I like to make things, and it doesn't feel so foreign that it's something that has to be outside of myself or just a talent. But I would like to say it like this. It's not who I am, but it's how I express who I am. The creativity is innate in me because I'm a person that likes to show who I am. So I have to come up with ways to do it. Well, my way is the piano. Maybe somebody else is plumbing. Maybe somebody else is law. Maybe somebody else is physics. But it's how I express who I am, and it comes out in a certain way. So the way I relate with the world best is through creative music, through creative writing. That's how I express myself, and I have to create things to express myself. So that's really, in a nutshell, what creativity means to me. It's which way do I present myself to the world, and which flow or which niche or which art form, whatever you call it, simply becomes like the how behind the why or the what of them doing.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. I love that just the images of that unique experience and expression that you have that's unique to you that no one else has in how you express yourself through creative means. And I'm so curious, being a musician for as long as you have, and I imagine that started fairly young. Most musicians started pretty young, but I'm curious, what's your earliest memory of being creative?
Okay, this is a trick question because memories are so fleeting, right? And my ADD brain just skipped through the commercials of my entire life, and so I have all these little moments. So I'll tell you the memory that I was told to remember, and then I'll tell you the actual memory. So the memory I was
Okay.
told to remember that I saw on home movies was me playing the piano at around 2 or 3 years old. And my mom always says I was trying to sing and play Sarah Smile by Daryl Hall and John Oates before I could talk.
Oh,
That's not my memory. That's what they told me. And so I've pretty much invented what that looked or sounded like at
right.
2 or 3 years old. But I would say probably the earliest memory that really stands out to me is playing around, I'd say seventh or eighth, not seventh, eighth grade, 7, 8 years old,
Mhm.
and doing recitals. And my mother was my music teacher. You might have guessed if you know her. Catching up with me and seeing me trying to play piano was because there was a piano in the house and she's a music educator. And I do remember her starting me on piano. And I do remember those first couple of songs that I was learning, and I had to play Buzzing Bee, right? And I would just try to keep playing as like, okay, my fingers have to do this, have to do this, have to do that. And both the discipline and the frustration, and then the joy of seeing people like it when they were clapping at the little recital. Those are the moments that kind of like crystallize in my mind as, oh, this feels wonderful. I worked hard and I got a benefit from it, and other people were happy. And
Mm,
somewhere in at 7, 8, 9 years old of learning the piano and playing these little recitals became like, oh, this is something I really could do, my with my life. Of course, you don't think that at 8, but
right.
it's the thread, right, that starts to draw in all the pieces that eventually become something. But so yes, I would say that was my earliest like real memory that really feels like something that I said, hey, I'm a creative, I'm a musician, I'm a pianist.
Hmm. Nice. I love hearing these early stories from people because I feel like it, for some people they've let go of that early creativity, but for people who haven't and it's continued, how has the creativity from 8, 7, 8, 9 kind of transformed into adulthood with you?
That's such a great question. It's hard to like the pieces together again, right? The puzzle pieces are still falling in. I would say the first thing that I draw from my early days of being a musician, learning to play piano, being a creative, the first thing I would draw is the power of community. Because I didn't just learn by myself. Every single time I was in a situation with music, it was always with other people. Now, as solo piano and learning classical, sometimes that doesn't happen, but thank goodness I was also in a church choir, and then my friends, and we were always so. And then the piano at home when when I'm playing. Okay, all the friends are coming over. We got to sing together. And my parents, actually, my mom and my dad and my whole family, we had this tradition of a Christmas of doing Christmas carols together around the piano. So everything revolved around the piano being a place of community. So if I would say something that draws a line between that then and now, it's still that way. I still do not feel comfortable in a silo, just playing music in the studio and then putting it out. I need people around. I need to feel like I'm interacting with people. I believe that this is a gift that we are supposed to share. This goes to that theme of does a tree fall in the woods? Does it make a sound kind of thing, right? If no one hears it, I think it's the same thing for music. Art has to be experienced by others for it to be art. And so for me, that really is the common thread, like family, connection, somebody else to chill and eat some food and play some music. And that's where it happens for me. That's where the joy comes in. So I would say that's probably the number one. There's probably other ones I could think of later, but that's definitely one of the key ones that I could tell you definitely started from then and is still happening now.
Oh, I love it. And I so resonate with that as well. The community around music and creativity, and how having other people around really sparks more creativity or new ideas or challenges ways that I'm thinking about what I'm doing or how I'm showing up in the creative expression that I am. It sounds like that happens for you as well.
100%. 100%, because I believe that we feed off each other when in that creative space. There's so much that we share in terms of experiences, but there's things that, like we said at the beginning, that are unique to us. And how do I know what else I could share unless I share it with somebody else and they come back to me and say, hey, no, but I hear it like this. I heard this chord like this, but I sang it like this. And so many different experiences that we live that we cannot necessarily speak out loud,
Mhm.
or kind of communicate through words, can be communicated through music, through art, through dance, through drama, through these other areas that suddenly give us a language that we didn't have before to understand each other. And so that's why I said it's uniquely human. I believe everybody kind of senses that art and creativity has to be, number one, community. And number
Mhm.
one, it has to be something that comes from inside you. It can't be borrowed. It can't be just, hey, I'm going to do what the other person did and then share it. Because we kind of know as soon as you say, hey, let's do the thing. And they're like, you're not passionate about that. You're just saying it. Like, nope, because it's not you. So I feel that that's the key of community and collaboration. That's why I've created a community at God and Gigs, because I needed other people to think different than me, but still
Mhm.
thought like me. And we're
Right.
able to, like, right? It's like both. It's like, I need you to know what I'm like. And I also need you to totally be different from me to give me the fuel to stay creative. And I think every single creative needs a tribe. Wherever you are, whatever you do, you need a tribe. And if you can find a tribe, people that, again, think both like you, but also don't think like you, that's where you're going to find your most creative space.
Yeah. Oh, I absolutely agree with that and think it's so important to have that tribe and can be pretty challenging if you are really used to just doing your creative expression on your own.
It's
So,
true. It's true.
any tips that you might give listeners who are thinking, well, creativity is just my own solo thing, but I want to expand it and share it with others. How might they go about doing that?
So this is for all the introverts in the audience, right? For all the people,
Yes.
and I'm one of them, by the way. When I say groups, I'm not talking about huge groups. There's a reason why I've never taken big tours. I have been a homebody my whole life as a creative. I've been a local musician, maybe taken one or two trips out of the country at for 25 years, because I believe, like, hey, my home is my sanctuary and
Mhm.
my local community is my tribe. So first thing I would say for someone who's saying, okay, maybe you're in a more solo type of performance art or even a creative art, where you're more doing sculpture or painting or even graphic design or something where you're in front of a computer or you're not even really connected with people. The first thing I would say to anyone that's like that is start with appreciating other people's work. You have to step outside of your lane and say, hey, maybe I create by myself, but somebody else is over there probably by themselves. They would love to have somebody else in the audience. They would love to have somebody else just appreciate it. So before you even try to collaborate, you first want to go and just start the conversation with somebody else who does what you do. And there's no pressure in that, right? So if you just show up at the museum and you happen to meet the artist, or you show up at the concert and you just say, good job, you've automatically kind of opened yourself up to it. So that would be the first thing, is appreciate other people's work. But then I would invite other people to yours. And that's the hard part. The hard
Yes.
part is when, yes, when you're like, wait, okay, so they have to actually look and see and share. Yes, that is the part that you all have to get over, that resistance of people saying, hey, what did you do? How did you do that? And then you have to open up. The vulnerability also creates that transparency, which creates that creative cycle of, I can change things. And nobody hated me when I didn't do it exactly right. So it's so important to do both of those, right? Open yourself up, go to somebody else's concert, somebody else's exhibit, and appreciate them. I call this the golden rule of artists. It's very much like the spiritual rule, right? Do unto others as you have them do unto you. And I said
Yeah.
to the artists, do unto other artists as you would have them do unto you. And so if you're a golden rule of artist person, you're going to go to their concerts and eventually they're going to start coming to yours. And it's just the way that life and creativity works. We feed off each other's energy, off each other's creativity. So if you feel like you can't find that person, you just got to open up and just go to that first place and then be patient and give more than you receive. And eventually it comes back.
Mm, so many juicy good tips in there. Thank you so much for that. I love that reminder to start with appreciating someone else's work and then that invitation for others to participate in the things that you are offering. So, being a musician, author, creative coach, podcaster, I imagine that you come up against your own hurdles, your own challenges. What are some of the maybe more creative challenges that you found yourself up against, and how do you navigate them?
Oh boy, this is the part where I have to like open up, right? I just talked about opening up. So
You did.
I would say that the first one immediately, the easiest one I would say is that the cop out one is, of course, writer's block. The what do I write? What do I say? But sometimes that is, I think, from creatives, it's the easy way out to say, well, I just don't know what to write. And I've said this to somebody, one of our challenges that we just did. Our distractions, our fears are usually not really what they say they are. So if I say I just really can't write, what I'm really saying is I want certainty. I want something to be, I want to be sure this works, right? So I would say my biggest obstacle is allowing myself the fear of, hey, this may not work. Hey, you may do a lot of work on this project. You may go out and release this song and nobody will listen. And being okay with that, being okay with the try and try again aspect of just releasing work and putting it out and not worrying about commercial success or critical success or financial success. Once you've been doing this for a while, I think we kind of build up this desire and goal that says everything has to work, and it's just perfectionism kind of in a mask, right? And I know I face that, and I fight that daily. Instagram is no help, right? Social media is
That is the
no
truth.
help to that comparison and worry about it. Am I measuring up? Am I really achieving my goals? And I have to step back. The way I overcome it is to step back and look at the one person that I connected with, the one person that said, "Hey, I was touched by that." The one person. I go back to the one. There's a phrase in a lot of faith communities about an audience of one, which we say is God, but sometimes the audience of one is the one person that He wanted you to reach. And
Mm,
so I have to remind myself that that one person that liked or thought it was cool or whatever is just as valuable if I had a million subscribers and a million people downloading my song. That's what kind of keeps me off the ledge, right? Of, hey, it's not happening. It's not happening. It's not happening. People aren't like liking my stuff, and I'm not fulfilled as an artist. But to be fulfilled as an artist, I need to be filling someone else. Period. And so if I do that, I can like come back off the ledge and say, okay, this isn't about how fast I make it, right? Because what is making it? We're still trying
right.
to figure that out. And the people who have made it, we find out don't necessarily like what they've made. So it's so important for me personally to stay off that ledge and say, hey, just because it didn't happen the way I thought it was going to happen, release the fear and stop worrying about the results and think
Right.
more about the process and enjoying it.
Yeah. Such a great reminder. I too find myself easily caught up in that hamster wheel of what's it going to be versus what is it now? How am I
Yeah.
experiencing it now? As you were talking, I had the thought of, not going to remember whose quote it is, but the quote, comparison is the thief of joy.
Joy, yes, that might. I remember. I have seen that quote. I don't want to misquote it either. Everybody will look it up on and tweet us or hit us.
Yeah,
Let us know
look it
what we
up.
what we forgot. But yes, I love that, and it is comparison. I've heard it compared to cancer, comparison, all these things. And again, I think it goes back to what we started with, Mark. The uniqueness of
Mhm.
what we've been given and designed as human beings. Like if and here's another quote that pops into my head from J.K. Chesterton. And he said that maybe God doesn't get tired of making daisies. He makes every single one new every day and just gets more joy of do it again, do it again, do it again. And each one, like if he doesn't get tired of making, like, I mean, come on, how many daisies are there in the field, right? Millions and
Yeah,
millions and millions and millions. And we can just go to all the other things, snowflakes, fingerprints, anything that you could
right.
think. There's so much uniqueness in the world. Why would we spend any time comparing ourselves to
Yeah.
other things and other people when the world is literally just full of a one, the only one that's designed like this? So we got to just accept our own design and just enjoy it and embrace it. And again, I'm encouraging people as I encourage myself.
Right, exactly. As you're saying that, I'm like, yeah, I'm following. I'm gonna practice this. It reminds me of, in kind of the Buddhist mentality or pieces of beginner's mind. Even if you're an expert, you can still access that beginner's space, and it's
Yes,
okay.
yes,
Yeah.
yes. Go back to that childlike faith,
Yeah.
that childlike joy. Picasso, again, we're going all down the quotes. And I'm sure you've heard the quote about Picasso say, every child is an artist, and the problem is
Yes.
staying an artist once he grows up. That's all of
Right.
us. We release
Yeah.
that childlike wonder and again, as we become professionals, especially, that's the hardest part, because now it's my living. And if I make my passion my living, now there's no joy in it because it has to be done and it has to create results. And another conversation I had on my podcast recently was a great talk about that, about we need to release ourselves from results. An apple can just be an apple. It doesn't have to be eaten.
Yeah.
And all these examples of nature again, right? It can just be a tree and just be a beautiful tree and not made into something. So not everything we create has to be used. It can just be beautiful and done and just be nice.
Yeah.
And that's the part again about releasing ourselves from that burden of it has to be this, and the other thing, and comparing ourselves.
Right. So, as someone who has made their passion a career, I don't want to say advice, but what wisdom might you have for someone who is who's on that journey of turning their passion into a career to keep that passion aspect of it alive?
This is a great question. And the key of this, again, preaching to myself, is realizing that it's all about those small wins, the small things that we usually, I don't know anyone that starts a musical career or a creative career and saying, I'm going to be the smallest, most insignificant artist on the planet. Like, nobody starts like that. We all start with this. That's the fuel that kind of fuels us. It's not for necessarily fame or ego, but it is that if this is beautiful, I want as many people to see it as possible, right? And so I think the first thing that someone's starting to get, number one, into the actual work and the career, is to acknowledge that it is a business. It is, now you're entering to another area where there are other skills required to share your gift. But then you also take those small steps. Maybe it is just starting your LLC. Maybe it is just talking to another business person or another person in the creative sense, right? Who can help you. That's why we have our organization, because I want to help people get those first couple of steps. But then it's stay in those networks and learn by doing. Learn by doing. Sell the first thing. Put the first thing on Instagram. And then don't stop when the first thing doesn't happen right away, because nobody gets there overnight. So the passion, I think, of doing the love of the thing stays when you don't allow the results to grab your attention so much. And you go back, I call this connecting with your emotional affirmation. We make a list in one of these challenges and we write down, what do you love? What do you feel when you create? And we write those things down. And I tell my students, put that next to your creative space so that every time you're tempted to say, oh my gosh, it didn't work, remember, I feel empowered when I write. I feel beautiful when I create. I feel great when I dance. I feel something when I sing. Remind yourself of that feeling, because feeling is not necessarily a bad thing if it helps fuel the consistency. So when you feel inconsistent, it's because you've lost connection with that passion. Go back, connect with the passion, and then go through the hard stuff. And then keep going. So it's this winding road, a flywheel, right? You have to get inspired to stay consistent. And then when you're consistent, you're more inspired. When you're inspired, you're more consistent. And it just keeps goes back and back and back and forth to remind yourself that you have to fill that tank. So that's be the thing I'll tell somebody starting. Don't expect the yellow brick road. It's going to be tough. But if you make those small bets and small wins and celebrate them, you're going to be fine.
I love it. Thank you for the wisdom in that and the little reminders. And as you were talking about inspiration, it made me curious, where are you drawing inspiration from these days?
Right now, honestly, it might sound like a broken record. I am drawing inspiration from my tribe. I'm drawing inspiration from the people in God Engaged. I'm drawing inspiration from people in my creative, my 360 coaching program, who has had, she's going to hate it when I give her, I'm not going to give her name, but she hates it when I probably tell her all her story, but had a heart condition that almost took away her ability to play trumpet in the last 2 to 3 years, a quadruple bypass caught before a heart attack, thank God, but has trouble, but is still getting ready to put out her first jazz album as a jazz trumpet player. Like that inspires me. That seeing another mom in my art group who has a 1 year old, a beautiful 1 year old, and just put out her first devotional. These are the people that I'm saying, how can I complain? Like I'm not dealing with that. And they're still out there doing what they're doing. So I draw the inspiration and like the fire from seeing other people doing what they're doing. And it's like, that's possible for me. Not only is it possible for me, we can do it together. I can help them. And so
Mm.
that honestly, again, going all the way back to that 8 year old in the recital where like everybody was in the room and everybody was happy and talking and eating the little cookies and punch. And I just remember that being like, this is cool. We're all celebrating music and art together. And so I honestly get all of my fuel. I'm definitely like a kind of an ambivert, but in terms of the connection, I get my fuel from other people. That's what inspires me. Anytime I feel like I should just put it down, don't play another note, don't release another album, I'm like, no, I see what they're doing. I know I'm capable and, and it fuels me. So absolutely, that's the number one thing that keeps me inspired.
Mm. I love it. And hearing you talk, it is inspiring to me. I'm like, yeah, there are so many people doing amazing things. And I love having that in my life. And when I am feeling like my energy is lower or I'm not feeling inspiration, turning to those touchstones or those stories or those people to uncover that inspiration again for me. So I can relate.
Awesome.
Absolutely. Now, working with other people and just being in the creative space for as long as you have, I imagine you've come across people who do not think they're creative, who don't understand creativity, who think creativity is only for certain people and not them. How would you encourage individuals who may not feel creative to find creativity in their life?
Well, this is going to be another person that's going to kill me when I bring them up. I'm going to use my wife as the example
Oh,
because
okay.
my wife and I met in college. She was a music major, but she's always been one of those people that kind of wants to stay in the background. And
Mm,
so she never wanted to be a quote unquote performing artist.
mhm,
Meanwhile, she can cook like nobody's business. I tell her she's like a robot. She sees a recipe on TV and then it's on my plate in like 10 minutes. I'm like, how did you? And then she is a singer and she does crochet and she does, and so her whole mind is these creative things. And yet she doesn't think of herself as a creative. And I think that's what I would tell somebody. You're defining creative by what you think a creative does versus who a creative is.
mm,
Okay. You're defining it by someone that's outside there doing things, making things on Instagram. Like that's what you think a creative does. What a creative is what I said at the beginning, someone who expresses themselves through a unique set of skills and gifts that God gave them. That
mhm,
is a creative. So that means pretty much everybody qualifies. You just have to find what is that thing that you express yourself through. Now, is it videos and the performing arts and everything? Well, yeah, then it's a lot easier to see that. But I've said that, I mean, I need a creative plumber when I see somebody, water coming out and I have no idea what that thing is. I need a creative plumber. I need a creative lawyer when I have an issue and I don't know how to find that thing and someone can draw from A to B in this law and this law. I need a creative lawyer. So every
mm.
single one of us has something in there where we can express ourselves in a unique set of skills. So again, is it performing arts for everybody? That's okay. But thank God not everybody's a performing artist because we need an audience. And if everybody could do what we do, we'd have no audience.
So
So
true.
I am so grateful. I was a music teacher for 8 years in the public school system, and I really believe that I was helping to train the next group of music consumers. Most of those children would not become Beethoven's or Mozart's or Brahms or Bach or any other, composer you could think of. Most of them were going to become music consumers. And so even if you are not a creative artist, you are an artist. Okay.
Mm.
You just have a different area of your art. And if it does come to something that's really fun and really cool and really, you're like, you know what? I kind of like this. I kind of think I'm going to do this. Follow those breadcrumbs because we'll probably lead you to something that you didn't expect. But I just want to give people that freedom. It's not about showing up on cameras and movies and things. It's about expressing who you are wherever that creative space lies.
Mm, I love it. Thank you for sharing that and saying it and reminding people who are listening who don't feel creative where they can find creativity in their life, their unique experience of expressing who they are. It has been such a pleasure chatting with you. I have one last question. What does it feel like in your body to be creative?
Mm. I love the I had a person that was just the somatic soul food thing. She calls it somatic soul food. I just felt that I know Tori Nika, you're gonna love this. But I'm thinking of her right now, like she would love this question. It feels honestly like I would say time stands still.
Ooh.
Um, there is something about people talk about being in the zone, right? Things like that. There is this kind of almost, yeah, I will call it spiritual because I do believe it's that. There
Yeah.
is a spiritual component of that where there's a verse in Ecclesiastes that says, He has set eternities in the hearts of men.
Mm.
And I believe that when we really touch a creative space, we enter that kind of eternity that we can't really fathom. We don't know what it feels like. What do you mean it's been 5 hours? Like we don't know what that really means. Eternity. It sounds like something so out there. But I
Yeah.
think we get there when we enter a space that we really are doing what we're called and gifted to do and doing it with freedom. So that's what it feels like. It feels like, again, I'm not trying to draw too many illusions, heavenly illusions or whatever, but it does feel like that kind of whatever it's called. It feels like I got there. I'm there, and more people with me makes it even better.
Mm.
If it's a choir, if it's a band, if it's a whatever, when you're sharing that feeling of like, oh my gosh, we could be here 2 hours, 2 days, and we wouldn't care.
Yeah.
That's the feeling. That's just what I think it means to really kind of hit the heart of what creativity can be for me.
Mm. Well, that is beautiful. And it makes me want to go do more creative pieces to get to that space more often. And thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me. If people want to learn more about the work that you do, the offerings that you have, how can they go about doing that?
Well, first of all, before you go look for my stuff, you should have already subscribed to this podcast. I'm sure you were subscribed, but if you haven't, what are you doing? You just heard this magic, and every episode that she puts out is just like this. Listen, trust me. I'm not saying that because she paid me. Okay. So now that you are following her podcast, let me tell you how to find mine. It is the God and Gigs Show, available on all podcasts. I figured that you're already using a podcast app right now, so it's easy to find. Just go to God and Gigs, one God, G-O-D, and Gigs, okay, plural for the second one. And then if you want to find us on any social media platform, it's the same, God and Gigs. And you can also find everything about what we do there. The podcast, our coaching community, the sky, I mean, it's everything. We said at the beginning, I have all these titles and it's the same thing, like everything I do. I do also have a music site, barely built it up. I'm not taking my own advice, but if you find me on YouTube or anything like that, it'll be under Alan Paul Music. So that's how they can find me.
Perfect. Well, I will put all of this in show notes so people have easy access, easy clickable links. And thank you again for taking the time to chat. I have thoroughly enjoyed our conversation.
All right, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for having me.
You are so welcome. Thanks for listening to the Sustaining Creativity Podcast. We'd love to keep in touch, so follow us on Facebook and Instagram. We are at Sustaining Creativity. Make sure to subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. Tag your friends and family so they can listen too. We love to hear from you, so leave your reviews, comments, and questions. Check out our website, sustainingcreativity.com, for upcoming offerings and creativity coaching. Tune in Tuesdays for our next episode. And remember, with creativity, anything's possible.